Welcome, 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 welcome. Shalom, Yam Shalishi. Shalom, Ya Shalishi. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Eve, happy Eve. Thank you all for coming in and joining me, Alicia and Anaya Elda. This is in essence of time 7:41 p.m. on day 24 of Exodus chapter 4. Thank you for coming in and joining me. We're on social medias, Alicia and Anaya Elda. Also, please share the word today for Exodus chapter 4, day 24. The message for today is the house of truth. The house of truth. So thank you all for coming and joining me. So let's get into this word. Let's get into this word. As always, break out those pens and papers and write down these scriptures because we learn by the word. We learn by the word only. So thank you for breaking out those papers and those pens, and let's get going. We always start off with the prayer. So Most High, thank you for bringing us to this moment, blessing us in this moment for all of your grace and mercy, because without you, there would be no us. So I want to thank you for all your grace and mercy and your blessings. Um, Hallelujah. So the message for today is about truth, truth, truth. So truth, simple word, right? And but it's very complex and complicated, unfortunately. And it was never meant to be that way. So we're going to get into what I'm talking about, right? But before we get into the message today about the house of truth, sharing some additional information with you, I want to reflect back on the last few days, where on the last few days I was sharing with you about the different provinces in heaven. And then I share a lot of to you all that you may have seen me sharing the day 23 message, along with after I actually got off the live. I another young man's life dropped into my feed, and this young man, and this was a confirmation. It was an affirmation of the message, right? The delivery of the message, because this young man, he was sharing his experience of when he actually had expired. He died, and he went to he saw heaven and he saw hell, and he was talking about the same provinces. Now, those provinces, and when I was sharing with you all about Arcana Celestia and the biblical codes, which are also Torah codes, right? A lot of the information that I was sharing with you, that the Most High showed me, and I was learning with you as well. Um, it was confirmed and affirmed when this young man's information dropped into my feed. And so a lot of times this will happen. We'll get the affirmation. Most High will send me the affirmation like, yes, daughter, that's where you're supposed to be. And that always makes me feel good, because it makes me, I know that I understood the message, right? And like as people said now, I knew the assignment. Okay. So I always feel good about that. So before we get into this message today, let me share this with you. I I was watching a really, really good teacher, right? Because I don't like to call people preachers anymore, pastors anymore, right? So I was watching a really good teacher, right? And I've been hearing, we've been hearing about spiritual warfare, right? And so there was an actual word that was very relevant to me, that was added to the idea of spiritual warfare, because you all know that I've been talking about that too. And so the word that was added to the idea of spiritual warfare was the word was basically what the word meant is that you really have to be careful when you're understanding spiritual warfare, because spiritual warfare, um, verbatim, right? It is that it's warfare in the spirit that you can't actually operate in the physical sense. You can't see it, right? But it's there. And so it's very divisive. That wasn't necessarily the word that I was looking for, right? But it's very divisive, it's very schematic, right? And so for us as individuals, when we are faced with a spiritual warfare, we want to go to the spiritual biblical sense of it, right? And so it's not necessarily always that. Sometimes, and when I saw this person speaking about it today, it was very relevant for me, and also was really relevant in the sense of what a lot of us don't even understand we're always going through, that we're going through right now, and that is the fact that this spiritual warfare is not just coming in the battle sense. It's not coming in the sense of, okay, we understand that things are happening in the world that we're going to have to battle, things that we can't see, like jealousy, envy, and hatred, and racism, and discrimination, and all those things. But these battles, and when we think of those things, we think of those things as outside of ourselves, right? And so when I was listening to this speaker, which was very relevant, um, there's a whole other point to the spiritual warfare, and that's this battle within ourselves. And it was relevant to a message for me because I'll tell you, sometimes even when we are deficient, right, and we are lacking in some areas, we don't understand that we are. The Most High will send someone or something to let you know where you falling down and you slipping up and you falling back too. And so I wanted to share this message with you because a lot of us, we might not be right now in this moment fighting the external fight of the spiritual warfare, but your spiritual warfare might be an inner situation. It might be an inner conflict that you are having. It might be some inner thoughts that you're dealing with, some inner conflicts, some personal situations, some personal ideals that we need to fight against because those are also demons and they come in that sense as well. So we have to be conscious of that. And if we don't even understand that, the internal demons and the internal conflicts and the internal spiritual warfare, we balance it inner and outer. And we got to understand that. And so I wanted to share that with you all because if you don't understand or you're not able to recognize it, how are you going to fight against it? So the Most High is sending those like myself, commissioned to help you understand and to plant those seeds of understanding. Because you may not have ever been taught this. You may not come from a place of understanding of it. So if you're able to see it, even if the seed is planted by recognition, it may be able to help you in some sense. So understand that there is spiritual warfare and there are inner battles and conflicts that we as people, on our individual level, have to deal with. That's part of the spiritual warfare because evil is coming for us in all kinds of ways, and we have to be able to deal with it. All right, so let the truth be made real today, right? This is going to come full circle, and let's get into this. All right, so the last few days that I came on, again, I was talking about the tribes and the gates and the land and what they meant. I was talking about what they meant in the spiritual sense, right? Because we were always taught to believe that these tribes, the 12 tribes, at the end of time, were going to be certain people and they looked a certain way. Yes, there is a retribution that's coming for people because of your hereditary ties, but then that retribution is going to come in steps as well. So even though you may look a certain way and you may have hereditary ties, there's still some steps you have to go through spiritually, and you have to make sure that you are living righteously and living in truth. Now, will you be a perfect person? Absolutely not, because none of us are perfect, right? Because we were born into sin. And so we got to battle all the time against it, right? In this spiritual warfare, right? Inner and external conflicts. So this is an ongoing battle, right? But the Most High is recognizing those who have retribution, right? tribe of Judah, right? If you recognize by ethnicity, also or Israel, right? If your ancestors have some ties to Israel, right? Part of the retribution, but also in a spiritual sense as well. You got to live right, right? You got to work at living right. You got to live by example. You got to be under fame, right? So all of these things are steps, and they take part in who will inherit the covenant, the promise. So let's get into this word today. And so here, day 24, Exodus chapter 4, day 24, we're talking about the house of truth. And so if you ever noticed, like if you were studying the word, you would hear oftentimes, or you would read where they were saying the house of Israel, or they would say the house of Ruth, or whoever had the dominant authority in the house, they would name the house after them, right? And so that's how that property, that house will be identified. And so here, the general term for the message today is the house of truth. The house of truth as one household, okay, one ideal, the house of truth. Now, Mrs. Walker. So we got to understand, if we all gonna live in the house of truth, then we got to work at living in being under the roof of the house of truth. Because just like anybody house, if you don't live in the house, you gotta follow the house rules. And if you live under the roof of the house of truth, that means what? You gotta be up under the truth. Will you be perfect in the truth? Absolutely not. But as long as you're working at it and you living under the roof of the house of truth, you got to keep working at it because you're a household member now. And we all need to be under the house of truth. So let's get into this message today. All right. So air. I want to talk about air. What is air in the sense of truth? The good of truth. So if you're gonna be an heir to the covenant, to the promise, that means that the only way you're going to be a part of those steps that I mentioned, right, is to be under good truth and righteousness, right? So you're going to be an heir to the good of truth. Now, what does that mean exactly? So when these things are known, right, the spiritual sense of these words, they follow in this series. And so remember when I was talking about Ammon, 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 right? So it signifies against the falsifications of truth. Remember when I mentioned to you all several times, even when I was teaching Revelations, and then the last one of the days since I've been teaching Exodus, the last few times, and I was talking about when the one of the first original commandments, the Most High said, "You cannot serve two masters," right? And so when we were conditioned into our prayers, right, of thanksgiving and gratitude. And we learned that prayer, right? And we started off praying to the Most High. We started out praying to the God of Christianity. And then we ended with Amen. Amen. Right? Amen. And so we start off with honor and oddity to one God, and we end up saying Amen. That's to another God. That's to another God. So, hello, we have to understand that that's what we're doing. And so I'm telling you all that we have to get unlearned and unconditioned from the errors and the wrong things that we were taught. And how are we going to do that? Somebody got to plant that seed. Somebody got to bring out that truth. We got to get to the truth, because if we don't get to the truth, we're going to keep on erring. Now listen to this. We There's a lot of people right now, you're waking up, right? We're waking up, we're awoke, we're enlightened, and all of those things. And so a lot of people are adopting the concept of, we got to get back to what our ancestors did, right? And we have these hereditary ties to our ancestors. But I'm gonna tell you all something. Some of our ancestors didn't get it right. Some of our ancestors, right, Israel, they were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, right? They were worshiping idols. They were doing sacrifices, right? They were doing a lot of things that they shouldn't have been doing. So you got to realize that. Even if you aren't doing it now, there are hereditary ties to those things. There are people who do things in the dark that you may not even know who they are. They do it in the cover of their homes, right? There's things that are veiled and things you can't see. Somebody might be in the church building preaching, talking about God, and then they go home and do sacrifices. I'm just saying. So we got to understand that these things go on. You can't cover your eyes or not hear or not pay attention or don't think these things exist, because they do. And I want you all to understand that omissiveness and passiveness is being complicit. It's time to start speaking out on the truth. It's time to start standing up on the truth. It's time to start pulling the covers back. Now, and I'm going to say this to you, and I'm going to say this for me and anybody else, that if we're going to stand and be in the house of truth, if we decide that we're going to try to live righteously, we got to face some of those demons and some of those skeletons and all those things that either existed, that are unresolved, or that are going on now that need to be resolved. Okay? And it's the truth, right? We're talking about truth today, right? And so these things are the truth. Now, are there some people who don't have such dramatic untruths or unrighteousness? Absolutely, yes, there are. But still, you don't know what's hurtful to someone else. You could have not spoken to someone, walking past someone who just needed to hear hello, right? Somebody, and here's the truth about it, and it may sound dramatic, you all, but you could have walked past somebody today that just wanted to be acknowledged, and that person could have went and jumped off the roof because they got tired of being ignored. You know, things are relevant. It takes something just so simple and small that's monumental. If you are health conscious, right? And you have a medical experience, right? Then you would know that it's possible in 2 minutes you could stop breathing. 2 minutes is a minute 2 minutes, but if 2 minutes could take your life from you to a mere 2 minutes, how monumental is that? So we got to stop minimizing things, Israel and Judah, because of our mindset, right? And our judgments and our stereotypes. We got to fall away from those things that we were taught, right? And we got to fall away from that warfare, that spiritual warfare, because remember, I said it is in our minds sometimes. It's in our judgments. It's in how we condition. It's how we saw our mothers and our fathers and our family members live. We saw them in judgment. We saw them in racism. We saw them in discrimination. And we knew after a certain time what it was. And some of us exemplified it, right? And some of us became them. So we got to fall away from those things that we know are not right. So let's get into this word today, right? And so here, and for those of you all that are actually on the Revelations teleconference, you can see this. You're seeing right now some words scrolling by, right? And so you can always go on Revelations teleconference and see this live again. It'll be on Facebook also, so you can always go back and look at it. But on the Revelations teleconference, you're going to see the scriptures scrolling and a lot of the information. And so here from one of the last 2 days, it talked about scripture. It said, therefore, Yah exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua, every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. All right. And so that's one of the bit of the information that's there. And then it goes on to say, let me change this. And it goes on to say, in every tongue acknowledge that Yeshua is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so it goes on to talk about how do you humble yourself, right? How do you humble yourself? So there's a way of still living in righteousness and truth. And so, and this is very relevant. So let me share this story with you all real quick. So there's a situation, right? And if you all ever been a caretaker for someone, it's it's difficult. It's difficult to be a caretaker for someone who is sick, a family member, someone you love. It's exhausting. It's physically exhausting. It's mentally exhausting, especially for someone who needs care all the time. It's exhausting. And we have to, it takes a lot. And so in the sense of that, right, in the sense of that, um there is a word that comes down and it talks about, and the Most High explains to us how to humble ourselves like Yeshua, right? Because when we think about what Yeshua did for us, right, and how much Yeshua sacrificed and how much he went through when he came in the physical sense. I mean, he was spit on and pierced in the side, and he was hung, and all of these things. Even the day before and the times before the crucifixion, he faced a lot of adversity, right, in opposition. And so, how could you, as a person, have faced that? How could you have humbled yourself for that? That is, that's not easy. It's not easy. And so, when the Most High added this, how to humble yourself like Yeshua, right? It was like, here's the highest example of humbling yourself. And it's like, it shows an example of, we need to work on this, how to humble ourselves. So I want to share that with you all. All right. So before, let me see if I can find that information. So share this with you all and talk about this one more time. So we can understand that. Let me see, bear with me a second. I want to find that for you all and talk about that again. Bear with me a second. All right, so therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is Yah who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of Yah without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you'll shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Yeshua that I did not run or labor in vain. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. What is that word saying? It's saying, as much as Yeshua suffered, right? We can never, by comparison, understand that to the degree of what Yeshua did, the greatest sacrifice ever. And so if you Keep that in mind. You're less apt to grumble and argue when things happen. When you have those inner conflicts or those issues that we think are so big in our lives, when by comparison they really are not. And so the Most High reminds us in that word, right, to be mindful of that and remember and humble yourselves. All right, so I want to share that with you. Let me keep going. Sorry about that for those of you who watch. All right, so let me share that with you. Now, let's get back to, bear with me a second, this word here. So in a previous live, I talked about Urim, Urim, and Thummim, Thummim, if you all know who that is. And so people argue about this theory, I guess. Scholars argue about this, like Urim and Thummim. So it means Urim essentially means being guilty, and Thummim essentially means being innocent. So what does it imply? It implies that the purpose of Urim and Thummim was to confirm or refute suspected guilt. So if Urim means to be guilty, then Thummim would mean to be innocent. And so when this concept was applied, it was applied more so in a sense of, people always ask this question, well, at the end of the world, if there was a judgment day, at the end of time, if there is a judgment day, who are going to be deemed guilty, right? Like, we didn't understand everything about God. You all say God, I say Yah, right? We didn't understand everything about Yah. And so how can we be guilty and be damned if we didn't understand? Right? And so here is what I will say to you all, because this could be like this long argument and debate, because it always is, right? And so someone actually had mentioned this to me one time, and they were talking about this. And so I want to share two ideals with you about that. When the person mentioned it to me before, they said they were in an argument or debate with someone about this exact subject, right? And so basically, this can be backed up by scriptures, but this was the person's answer, and it's also a scripture with the same response, right? And so basically, it was saying, person was saying, well, if judgment day comes and I have to stand before y'all, and y'all will ask me, why didn't I do right? Why didn't I live right? Why did I sin? Or any of the questions that come up. And so I'm going to say, well, I didn't know everything. I didn't know I was doing wrong, And so the person answered another person and said, well, you had people that were sent to plant seeds. At some point in your life, you heard someone say something about sin or righteousness or doing right or what's wrong, or however. You may have been in a good church, right, under some good leadership. So you may have heard correct information or some parts of it. So at some point in your life, Most High judging, right? Yah judging, knows your life, knows who you are. Most High will know, right? At some point in your life, then you knew. And the only reason that you won't be damned to judge to go into the provinces of hell would be if you didn't know. And so at that point, the person probably should, right, not lie, right? Because Most High would know this. This is just like a scenario. But some people will probably actually go, I didn't know. And then what if the Most High started naming off times where you actually were privy to that information? Okay? And so the scripture that backs that up is the story of Lazarus. Lazarus, the rich man and Lazarus. Scripture backs that up, that story, because the rich man was so conceited and arrogant in all of his ways. And then when he died and he went to hell, right? And remember, he used to pass Lazarus by all the time, wouldn't even speak to him, feed him, do anything. And so when the rich man died and went to hell, he had the nerve to recall Lazarus, who he ignored every day of his life, and say, well, can Lazarus come down here? And if he just comes down here and sees how it is, he can go back and tell my brothers how it is so they won't come here. Right? So, in essence, he was guilty. He was guilty. So, when we think about the idea of Urim and Thummim, so here's the understanding of for those who you can't have an excuse about not knowing. The only ones that will have an excuse about not knowing, if that means you got to be totally innocent. And so here, let me share this idea with you about Urim and Thummim, right? So, to me, if they do not know, have never known, and do not understand, how can they be guilty than all others Urim? So you can fall under Thummim and be innocent if you didn't know, you've never known, you've never heard it, no one ever talked about it, you were never around it, no, your mama never told, your ancestors never told you, all of that. We'll fall into all these subjective times when you were privy to it. Now, if you've never had any of those times in your life, that wouldn't make you fall under never have known. Other than that, you're considered guilty. And for the most part, all of us are. So I'm going to leave that. I want to share this scripture with you. Let's get into these scriptures. Isaiah 40:25. So Isaiah chapter 40, verses 25. All right. So I want to share that with you. Bear with me a second. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 25. It says, to whom then will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and behold, who has created these things? Who brings out their hosts by number? Most High is saying, I'm the creator. I created all of these things. Look up, look around. From the most minute, smallest thing, the smallest thing, the lowest number of anything, to the largest scale of anything. That was me. Most High is saying. Who can compare that? Here's another question I'm gonna ask one. I asked this question one time, and then so here's another part to this question. So I'll repeat the first question. For those of you all who don't believe in God, right? Those of you all who don't believe in Yah, right? Or even if you fall into any other religions, ideologies where you believe into your own God. And I honestly, I'm naive about this because I really would like an answer. Maybe you can email me, you can call me, you can text me, you can hit me on Facebook, inbox me, DM me, whatever, right? Because I really would like an answer if someone has an answer. I've never heard of any other God, right, besides Yah, making a sacrifice, coming here in a physical form, sacrificing himself for those that he claims to love. If your God has done that, I just wanted to know your God's name. That's all. The other part of the second part of that question is this. Does your God claim to be a God of creation? And if so, I would like to know your God's name. I'm very naive on that matter. I'm absolutely serious. So I just wanted to know that. That's the second part of that question. Did your God make the sacrifice for you, coming in a physical form into the world and making a sacrifice because your God loved you? And is your God the God of creation? I just want names. That's it. All right. So that was Isaiah 40:25. So here I want to just share a thought with you. So on April 14th of this year, I was talking to my eldest children. We always have these talks. I've always taught my children. We had like Bible study when we didn't go into the church house, right, or the church building. And so we would read the Bible and talk about the Bible, right? So, we have talks like this all the time. So on the morning of 4/14, I had a short talk with my eldest children about subject of the Bible, and God, Yah, being real. So my daughter asked if I knew about Hitler's backstory, which of course I did. And I told them about the P-O-R incident, P-E-O-R incident. So you all can look this up. We talked about hieroglyphics, how oftentimes history repeats itself to affirm or confirm, and then how things intentionally happen to confirm our doubts. And so we also talked about how Yah is always here and confirms by intention. So we were talking about a lot of things, right? And so we went on, everybody went on, we talked for about an hour or two. Everyone went on about their day. This was early in the morning. So in that same afternoon, this is when, and I talked about this particular word, I want to say it was like day 18 or 19, 20. The Most High gave me a word, Ansalah, Ansalah, right? And so even in my teachings, and you all hear me say, I learned this too, because the Most High would drop words and information into my spirit, and I don't not full experience or may not even know about it, and I have to go research it and study it, and it keeps leading me. It keeps leading me. It keeps leading me in information that I add to the message that the Most High wants me to share with you all. And so this word Ansela came up, and so with this word Ansela, um, there was other words when I started looking it up, right? That was connected to this word. It led me to this word in the research. And so as I started studying this word, it started connecting and connecting and connecting. And so the message came together. And so the additional words confirmed the information. It lined up with all things spiritual and biblical that I had already found. So I want to share this with you all. One. So, and I don't like to like give other titles of books or anything like that, because we stick to the word, right? The Bible. But this is part of the confirmation and the affirmation of this word Ansela. So that's why I'm sharing it with you. So as I was doing the research and I was looking up that word Ansela, typing it in, Googling it, right? A book came up. This book was titled Egypt Study 26. This book was found in the Library of Congress. The title of the book was Ancient Egypt, Her Monuments of Hieroglyphics. So I didn't read the whole book. I just started skimming, reading a few pages, and in the first few pages, I found some information. So the book was published. Let's see. The original book was written with some information in 1794, and then it was, I guess, rewritten or re-edited in the 1800s, and then it was republished in 1994, right? And so when I was reading into the first few pages that I was actually reading to, it summarized a few pages, and so it was talking about Napoleon, Napoleon's travels, how he was really the only person who could confirm, right? Determine some facts about Exodus, the Red Sea parting, the Egyptian slave trade, right? Napoleon, they said Napoleon could confirm this because he was a world traveler. And so by him traveling, he was one of the first few earlier travelers. He was able to confirm some of these things he had heard about biblical history, right? Interesting, right? So look it up. And then while I was researching, it led me to the book of Esther. This word Ansala led me to the book of Esther. So when you all get to the research, make sure you look it up. So in the earliest morning, right, the Most High spoke into my spirit. I started to research. As I began to research this time, I started noticing there was numbers for all of these subject matters, right? Ansela, Book of Esther, Egypt, all of these had some type of numbers. Now, as long as the Most High called me on this mission when I was teaching Revelations, even when I started teaching Exodus, every time I was doing research, there was always these numbers, right? They weren't scriptural numbers like how you find the context on the scriptures. These were numbers, and I never paid attention to those numbers, right? But for some reason, the Most High was causing me to look at these numbers as I was looking up these subject matters. And so I noticed these numbers and that these numbers were on all of the subject matter. I even shared some of the numbers with you, day 22, day 23, right? I shared some of the numbers, and I'm going to share some with you all today. So these numbers, it was part of my research. So then I started looking up these numbers as I was doing the research on the subject matter, right? So I understood at this point, I finally understood that these numbers were like numbers associated to Bible codes, Hebrew lexicon numbers, um, biblical codes, which were relevant to the Torah. Okay. Um, Now, these codes, I don't see them in like the Bible that I study from, but I started seeing them in all the other research. So, did I make them highly relevant? No, because I always use the Bible first, but they were relevant because it was trying to tell me something, lead me to the message. So, study for, once I started noticing these codes, I was finishing up my message to you. I started studying. I stopped studying around 7 p.m. This was on the Holy Passover Eve. That was that Thursday, right? It was on the Holy Passover Eve, where I was then led to the name of a mathematician who he had since expired. His name was Michael Drosnin. And so he was like really the only one that made a movie documentary called The Bible Codes. So I looked at the movie. It was kind of like a documentary movie. So during the course of the movie, many things I discovered in my research earlier were confirmed, right? I read about it, I researched it, then it led me to this Bible Code movie, and then it started confirming everything. It started talking about Napoleon. It started talking about a lot of these things that I already read. When that happens, I'm gonna tell you all, it's called an affirmation. Affirmation, right? And so those of you all that have studied with me, I say that. So, regarding the book of Esther, remember I told you Esther. So Esther, the book of Esther finding, what it did confirm, the book of Esther finding information regarding Napoleon, information regarding Moses and the Red Sea. This book confirmed that it actually happened. It confirmed some facts about the Exodus. It touched on some subjects of doctrines, right? And truths. Truths. Remember, today's subject matter is we're talking about the house of truth. Bear with me a second, you all. Keep on going with this. All right. Um, so these numbers, you all have to understand if you have been studying the scriptures, um, early in the Bible, you get numbers, numbers. The Most High works in numbers, you all. Numbers, relevant. Most High does everything in numbers. So numbers are relevant. You must start paying attention to the numbers. When Most High gave instruction, it was numbers, right? So we got to start paying attention to this. We cannot ignore it. All right. So what is a prophetic number? Prophetic numbers of the Bible are about the numbers in the word of Yah. All right. The book reveals that numbers Yah used in prophecies in the Bible, right? These prophecies. The Bible is full of numbers. Like for instance, when we think about the Garden of Eden, there's 4 rivers that flow about out of the Garden of Eden. It talks about the length of the rivers, and it talks about the length of the gates and cubits, right? Most High, when we think about prophecies, things being prophesied, it gives like numbers. Okay, so we got to pay attention to that. For instance, the walls of Solomon's temple, numbers. How many souls will be sealed in the second coming? Numbers, 144,000. These numbers, we can't ignore these numbers. Okay, because if you knew about the relevancy of the numbers, it may help you understand, do the right thing this time. So, as always, I say affirmation. The fact that the Most High led me to what the intention was, what the Most High's intention was. And so you all know I always say, when I'm doing the teachings, right? And I say this thing is going to come full circle today, right? The intention came full circle to me. What the Most High wanted me to understand. All of these messages for the last few days, for teaching Exodus, for teaching Revelations, affirmation, for the subject matter of the numbers. The numbers are prophetic. The numbers have intention. The numbers are relevant. The numbers foretell what was and what is to come. They are relevant. All right. When I was looking at the information, and this is for the naysayers and the those that don't believe, the Most High is real. It's real. For those of you atheists, you all don't want to believe that. Here is the confirmation for me. When I gave you all information, other books talked about Napoleon, how in this book and how Napoleon, if you go look it up, if they haven't been, if it hasn't been taken out, right? Or excerpted out of these books, the information is there. Go look it up for yourselves. You all don't want to believe, right? You got to remember one thing about history and books that were written, rewritten. They were rewritten, some of them. They were edited, some of them. History is his story. The only people that know if something is true is if they were there. And as far as I know, in the beginning, right? In the beginning of the world, people lived long time, right? If they were worthy. People don't live that long anymore. With sin, our lives became shortened. So the only people that would know about true history are the ones that was actually there. Other than that, anything that we believe falls to our own beliefs, what you decide to believe. All right? And what you decide to believe is your faith, what you have faith in. All right? And so, other than that, you might have a few artifacts, some books, some research, but it's really what you choose to believe in. For those of you all who know about the spiritual sense, you can feel when it's right. You can feel when it's wrong. And we're speaking exactly about the word, right? Your belief about the Most High. If you feel in your spirit it's right, move forward. Learn, research. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Witnessing and testifying. That's what you're supposed to be doing. When the Most High sends you those, right? Human. When the Most High sends you those to help you understand and to plant seeds of knowledge, tell you where to go research, trying to uncondition you from the lies and the conditioning. That's what is supposed to be happening. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what I'm commissioned to do. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people like me, a lot of spirit souls like me, right? Most High condition them at a time like this. Is it Pastor Johnson that been a pastor for 60, 50 years? However, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But you do need to understand there's been a great falling away of those who didn't do the right thing. A great falling away, right? Most High has removed all of those who misinformed, intentionally misinformed, stole, taxed, took taxes under the guise of Yah. They didn't do right. They didn't do right. Right? They were expected to serve and be in servitude to the Most High, and they didn't do right. So Pastor Johnson and all of those like him have been removed, will be removed, are being removed. They fell away, fallen away. That's the purpose of the Most High at this time, such as now. That's why in Revelations it starts and begins when it talks about the churches. That's why in the last few days I was talking about the churches and the truth. That's why. All right. So how can we? I'm gonna end this today, right? In this manner, I'm talk about some things. So understand the biblical numbers list. Understand the universal history of numbers and reference to the Bible. Okay, and so here is the message I want to leave you with today. So here's the message I want to leave you with today. Cause see, one of my girlfriends asked me, she said, why are you always talking about against the church? I'm not talking against the church. I've been commissioned to tell the truth and unconditional lie. And it talks about the church. Okay? It got to be unveiled. It must be uncovered. And it's relevant to the church. So I'm just doing what the Most High asked me to do. All right? And so now that we know these things, right? If you've been coming back and listening, and you've been listening to other people that the Most High commissioned, if you just happen to be scrolling or on your phone and something drops in your timeline, or the Most High speaking to you in the spirit or whatever, and they're talking about the same information, it is not ironic. It is intentional, right? You either have a purpose and it's on purpose and it's for a reason, right? And so now that the seed has been planted, you can't say you didn't know, right? Remember, Urim and Thummim. So now, let me say this to you. How can we unlearn and lie? How can we be unconditioned? How can we know the truth? We're going to keep researching. We're going to keep studying. We're going to keep listening, right? How do we know how to do things right? There's three keys to the kingdom, right? I'm going to leave you all with this tonight. There's three keys to the kingdom of heaven: binding, loosing, and knowledge. Three keys: binding, loosing, and knowledge. Let me give you all a definition for binding, right? You already know what knowledge is. You already know what knowledge is, because I'm sharing it with you. What does it mean to bind? Let me give you all a definition of binding. Binding. All right. Give you all a good definition. So, a binding of an agreement or promise involving an obligation that cannot be broken. So, what does binding mean? An agreement or a promise. It involves an obligation that cannot be broken. The words that come associated to the binding: irrevocable, it cannot be reversed; unalterable, it cannot be altered; unbreakable, it cannot be broken; indissoluble, it cannot be dissolved; it's permanent. So when something is bound, it's binded. Nothing or no one can change it. That's one of the keys to heaven. Knowledge is another one, because once you know, you start to do better. Once you start to live in the house of truth and understand what righteousness really is and what truth really is, right? You start to do better, right? And lastly, the third key is loosing. What does it mean to loosen, right? Let me share this with you. What is a spiritual loosening? In the sense of spiritual warfare and loosening. What is that? Let me share this with you. So, hold on, let me do something better here. Let me do something better here. So, let's see. Also, let me say this, to binding. Binding. Um, Binding, and I said this yesterday, and I believe I said it earlier today. As above, so below. Whatever you do in terms of binding, right? So what does it mean to bind? Okay, I explained that to you. It's a very powerful witnessing tool. So like just like I'm doing the work right now, right? Bringing in the knowledge, binding. We're trying to explain to people, how to get out from under the conditioning, how to get out from under the lies we were taught. Do you even understand that you were taught the lie about spirituality? You were taught the lie about the churches. You were taught a lie about truth. You were conditioned up until this time of now to believe and not understand what's the truth, what's now the truth, and what's a lie. So the condition has changed us where we don't even understand truth, and we don't even understand a lie. Where we think good is bad and bad is good. So these were our conditionings, right? And so when we bind things and we send knowledge, right? We're helping people to come up out of her, to come up out of her, so people can get a better understanding of what they need to know. And so we our covering is taken off, right? And we become unblind, right? Because what's been happening progressively over time, generation after generation, right? This is what's been happening, right? We've become blind, right? And so binding is moving the covers back. All right. So, um, what is loosening? Loosening. It's kind of like binding, right? It takes effect in the spiritual realm, right? You want to loose a person from bondage, right? Spreading that knowledge, helping them to understand. All right. Um, Let me see. Loosening. So how can I explain it to you? Um, when a person is so stuck in their ways, right? And since we're talking about the spiritual sins and the conditioning, we have to keep on working at a person, giving them knowledge and giving them examples and showing them things to help them understand and keep spreading knowledge to them. And we got to hope that they will get thirsty for the word and keep coming back on this live, hallelujah, right? And then the Most High will keep sending people on their feed, or maybe somebody at the grocery store will send a word to them that'll catch their attention. All right. So this is what we want to happen when we're loosening. When we're loosening, this is what we want to happen. Um, so those kind of things. So when we talk about the three keys to heaven, the three keys again, I want to tell you: binding, loosening, and knowledge. Right? And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with this: the keys to heaven. This scripture, the keys to heaven. All right. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. As above, so below. As above, so below. What did the words say? How are you going to get to heaven? It goes in a reverse. They understand because they're in heaven. The spirits in heaven understand. They got there, right? And so, how are you going to get there? By binding, loosening, and knowledge. If you here on the earth And you get to understand how they got there, right? You're going to work while you're down here in the physical world. You're going to be an example. You're going to live on the truth and righteousness. You're going to work hard every moment of your life to stay above and stay in righteousness and correction. And so whatever you loose here on this earth will be loosed in heaven. What exactly does that mean? Your work here will be exemplified if it's good and righteous in heaven. It's almost like, here's a good example. You see a doorway. You see a doorway far off, right? And you're walking, trying to get to that door, right? You're walking, trying to get to that door. And it seems as you're walking to that door, it seems the door is moving further and further away. And sometimes it seems like you're getting closer to the door and you're almost there and all of a sudden it moves out the way. And sometimes it seems like you're walking really fast and you're almost there and you slide back really far, right? Here's the better example. You're walking in a desert, right? And you see water and you need water. It's a mirage. And you walking, walking, walking. As soon as you get there, you realize that that was just a mirage, right? And it really wasn't water, right? But you was doing the work and you was walking and you was walking. So finally, after you get done walking and you finally get close to that water, the air starts to change. You feel the salt in the air. You smell the salt in the air. You know it's water nearby, right? And you finally walk and you touch the damp sand and you realize, yes, this is the water. And you cannot believe it, right? And so what was the work? You did the work. You got to that water. You were determined. You wasn't let anything gonna stop you. You wanted to get to the living water. That living water was the Most High. You did the work. And so how did you get to the Most High and was able to get to heaven? Because you did the work. And so every single time you took a step and you were determined to get to the water. And every time you took a step and you were determined to get to the door, and it was you doing the work. You don't let nothing get in your way. You don't let nothing stop you. And there were things that came and got in the way, and you were distracted and all these things, but you kept your determination. You kept moving forward. This is life. Yah, Judah, Israel. This is life. That's what happens. But you got to stay determined. And you got to stay focused. And you got to stay on the right road. And you got to work hard every moment of your life. And the devil in all his forms and all his names and demons and are going to come. And your dysfunctions are going to happen. And your inner conflicts are going to happen. And even those who love us or those who love you are going to be used by the devil to prevent you from getting to the door into the water, right? It's going to happen because you are a prize. You are the prize. The Most High sees you as the apple of the Creator's eye. You have a purpose and you have an intention. And even the devil knows you, right? The devil knows your potential and your purpose. And if you are not worth anything to the devil, and all the names that the devil goes by, you are not worth anything, devil's not going to mess with you. But for those of you all who have an assignment, those of you all have a co-assignment, right? Those of you all are relevant. And even if you're trying to work and do the work, they're coming for you. Don't be scared. You need to understand. The only person, not person, the only spirit you should be worried about, the only entity that you should be worried about is the one that can send you to Gasing, right? That can damn you to hell. Other than that, nothing else. We live in the physical bodies. And we have to understand, yes, there's fear. Yes, we can be passive, right? Yes, we can be omissive. You can be complicit in evil deeds. All of these things because the devil knows the temptation of the flesh, right? The devil knows your weaknesses and what you like and what you shouldn't be doing, right? It will send you everything you love, like desire, crave to get you off the road and the focus so you won't get to the water, right? Or to the door, the open door. We have to remember this. And if you can remember it just like that, you can focus. The only time you need to have focuses on is when you're trying to get to the door in the living water. Other than that, things need to be bound, unbound. They need to be unloosened, right? That's what needs to happen. All right. Thank the Most High for this word today. Being here and the message coming down in this message. I did a little bit too much talking today, but that's okay. The message came through, the word came through full circle today. Thank you all for coming in with me. Thank you for joining me. Please spread this good word. All word is a good word. We haven't even gotten to the hidden prophecy, but we got to a lot of good stuff. So I need you all to please come back. All right. I love you, my brothers and sisters. Right? Agape. Thank you for coming in. Have a good evening. Shalom. And come back for day 25. All right. Peace, love, and might.